Okay, so now let's talk about creating dynamic hair. So with anything dynamic, the first thing you want to go to is your animation settings, and make sure you have playback speed set to play every frame. If this is set to real time, your dynamics are not going to simulate properly. They're basically going to skip frames in order to keep it playing at real time, and you need to simulate every single frame. So play every frame. Having play every frame is very, very important when it comes to anything dynamic. So I want to hit save there. The other thing that's important is that you'll notice that my character is to scale. So my grid is set to centimeters, so my character is probably 5 feet tall, not a super tall character, but he's to scale. And anything involving dynamics, scale is extremely, extremely important. You know, one of the examples I use in the classroom when it comes to scale is if you take a tiny piece of paper and a large piece of paper and try folding them both, that large piece of paper folds completely differently than the tiny piece of paper does. So scale is very, very important when it comes to anything dynamics. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to select my scalp here, and I'm going to go to my FX tab and click this button here, which is my hair output properties. And let's reset those settings just so they're the default currently. I want to make sure my output is NURBS curves. We're basically going to be using the NURBS curves to use as guides for XGen. So I only want NURBS curves. My U and V count, I can make that something like 40 and 40. We're not going to use, you know, we're not making individual hairs here. We're using guides. So we're going to make these curves that are going to have hairs around them, and a bunch of these hairs are going to follow the actions of a single curve. I can make my randomization something like 0.5, and we'll make our length, let's make our length like 15, and our points per hair, we'll make that 15 as well. And we'll do create hairs. Now I'm going to get an error here. It's not really an error, it's just sort of a warning saying that I'm making a lot of hairs, but that's okay. It should still solve fairly quickly. And then we have our hairs. So if I hit play, we see our hairs fall like actual hairs would. Now, I'm not quite sure why our model disappears. That's probably just a glitch in Maya. But we can come over to our attribute editor, and we can go to, let's see, go to our hair system or hair shape, and we can affect some settings here. So I can come in and say dynamic properties, stretch resistance, compression resistance, bend resistance. I can, you know, sort of increase or decrease those. Stiffness scale. So all of these things are things I can kind of manipulate on the hair level. And remember, our hair is going to be driving our animation. So the XGen is going to give us the look, and our hair is going to be driving the animation. So if I want, say, my hairs not to bend so much on those, on the close to the follicle, I can come in and decrease my bend resistance, and then they'll bend a little less. So maybe something like 0.5 is probably pretty good. Now the other thing that you're going to notice is that our hair just passes right through the ears, and that's because our body is not colliding with our geometry. Now I could make our mesh here collide, but our mesh has a lot of geometry to it, so a lot of polygons, so that would just add to the simulation. So what I've done is I've created a piece of proxy geometry here to collide with that instead of colliding with our whole body. So it's just a piece of low poly sphere with the ears extruded out and sculpted a little bit. So here I can go to in-cloth and create passive collider. And now if I back up and play, we'll see that our hair is actually colliding with those ears. Now there are some instances where it passes through the ear or passes through the collision object. And I want to find those because I don't want that to happen. I don't want it to stick to that. And see, there's an area here where they're passing through the ear, but not actually the collision object. But this one is sticking because it's actually passing through the collision object. So what I can do here is I can come over here and select the control vertice and hold down L, and that's going to lock the length of my curve. So I can just kind of move that out of the way. And now as I hit play, nope, it still sticks. So let's maybe try a different take to that. Let's select that one, and I'm going to click this guy right up here, which will select my end CV on that point, and then I'm going to hold down L, which is lock length, and then I'm going to grab that guy and kind of move it until he's no longer passing through that collision geometry. And I think that's pretty much the only one. But now as I hit play, that guy seems to not want to animate now. Oh, he's still animating. We see that input curve and not the output curve. So, but that's fine. And once we sort of have back up. Once we have that as a collision object, we can hide it. So I can just hide that, and it's still going to collide. So the next issue I see is that as my hair falls, a lot of it is falling over the face, and I don't really want it to fall over the face. I want him to have, I want his face to be kind of clear. So I'm going to select all my edges, deselect the scalp, and I'm going to hit F8 to go into component mode. And basically what I can do here to kind of trim the hair where I want it to be trimmed is just select those vertices and hit delete. So now he has some bangs. So the other thing that I don't quite like is how some of these guys are just falling over the ear, and they should really kind of be behind the ear. So I'm going to select a big group of these edges here, and again deselect my scalp. And I'm going to click on this guy again, which is going to select those end CVs. Let's make sure that we don't have our whole hair system selected when we do that. So it only selects those guys. And again, from here I can hold down L, which will lock my length. and I can pull those guys back. Like that. So now whenever I animate, it should actually fall behind the ears the way that I wanted to. Now every once in a while you're going to get a stray like that, and this guy is actually doing what it should. It's just the fact that my collision object is below the ear. And I have the same thing over here. So I can do the same thing that I did before. I can just grab, basically what I'd want to do is grab these two guys. Let me play that and make sure I choose the right ones. So yeah, I'm just going to grab these two guys and click this guy again. Hold down L and move those guys forward. So they kind of fall how I want them to. Now this other hair system here, I have a follicle and then I have a output curves. I can just Control H. I can hide those follicles for now. So I have one other guy there. I have a few guys here that are going through the ear. I have that guy going through the neck, but that's basically because we don't have a collision object for the neck. So I'm just going to leave that one be. And I'm going to move these guys back up there for a second. We hid that, so that's why that's not showing up. So let's unhide that guy real quick. And then select these guys that are going through the ear. And let's move them up. And again, I'm holding down L to lock my links together. And I just want to move them sort of out of harm's way so they don't go right through that ear. I can also use my scale tools. So again, hold down L and I can scale those guys together. And then I can move them back. So this becomes, that L key is huge. That becomes a very cool way to sort of edit your style. So I can back up, select those guys, hit play, and see how that works. So yeah, so that looks a little bit better. And then whenever I have that sort of set up the way I want, what I can do is I can set that as my start position. So I can come up to in hair and go to set start position from current. And that will basically make that my start hair position. Sometimes it doesn't want to do that to all of them for some reason. But if you do that one more time, so if we hit play, and try that one more time, in hair, set start position from current. So now, it still doesn't want to do those guys. That's okay. Okay, so now I have my hair. These are going to be my guide curves. So now I want to create my XGen description. So I'm going to select my scalp, and I'm going to go to XGen, and I'm going to go to Add New Description. And I'm going to call this elf hair for my description. Dynamic. And then we'll say elf hair dynamic collection. I'm going to use splines for this. I'm going to use randomly across the surface, and I'm going to say placing shaping guides and hit create. All right, now right away we're not going to see much because our curves aren't set as guides yet. So we have our curves there, but we need to actually apply them as guides. So I'm going to select my curves, and I'm going to go over to utilities, and I want to select, by default, that nothing is selected. I want to select curves to guides. And I don't want to delete my curves because I want to still use their dynamic properties. So I don't want to delete the curves, and I want to make sure I have preserve dynamic link so I can keep that hair system attached. So I'm going to deselect delete curves and select preserve dynamic link and hit add guides. So that'll take a few minutes. And now we see that we have our XGen hair there applied to each guide. And if I go back to my primitives and hit play, we're going to see a bunch of other hair snap in there that's not necessarily applied to those guides. So let's back up a little bit. So from here, what I can do is I can increase my density in my primitives tab. So that'll give me more hair. I can change my width ramp. So if I want those hairs to kind of taper off a little bit at the end, I can do that. And now this guy is looking kind of bald over here. And again, I think that's because of our, could be because where our collision object is, it's a little below our mesh. So what we can also do to kind of alleviate that is, so a lot of these guys are already underneath. So let's try making our scalp a collision object as well. So I'm going to go to select our scalp and go to in cloth, create passive collider. And we'll back up and we'll see if that has any effect, a little effect, but I think in most cases our hair is already below that point, so that's why it's sticking out. So what I want to do to fix that, it's let's go to our hair system here and just hide it for a sec. So Control H to hide that. And I'm going to select these guys that are all kind of going through the scalp and deselect the scalp. And go back to my effects and click that guy again. Hold down L and I'll move those guys up. Move those guys up, holding down L. And hit play. So now that they don't actually pass through the same way. So now I can select those guys and again go to in hair, set start position from current. So now if we unhide our description here, that should look a little bit better. There's still areas we need to work on, but you know, we can always go back and work on those. But our hair for the most part is working well. Now if I want to add other properties to this hair, let me back up a second. Sometimes your hair does not connect up to the guides very well. So if that's the case, what you want to do is select your hair system and go to use animation and say attach hair system. In this case, it's already attached, but sometimes that doesn't attach up right off the bat. So from here, what I want to do is go to modifiers, and I can add some modifiers. So let's add a clumping modifier. So I'll click on the little add button over there, and we'll add a clumping modifier. Now with the clumping modifier, it's not going to work as soon as you connect it up. Basically, it needs to know where the clumping areas are. So I can come all the way down here to the bottom and go to setup maps. And you can add a map to this, so you can have it generate maps, or you can have it, you know, basically if you click generate, it'll want you to paint a map. We're just going to use our guides. So where every curve is, there's going to be a clump. Those hairs are going to clump together. So I'm just going to use guides and hit save. And then we'll see our hairs clump together. Like so. Again, those guys are kind of acting weird because they're going through the geometry for some reason. Click volumize clumps. I can edit these guys a little bit. I can say clump. I can kind of make that go crazy if I want. I think a value of 1 will be fine. A mask isn't really going to do anything because, again, we're using our guides as our clumps. So then I can add maybe a noise modifier. And let's increase our magnitude a little bit, so maybe something like 5. That basically just adds a noise to our hair. So, and that for the most part is how to make hair. Now I still don't like how that's kind of balding a little bit there. So let's go back again. Let's hide our actual hair. So Control H. And I'm going to unhide my collision object. Shift H. And let's take this guy and move him up a little bit. See if that affects our animation at all. We may need to select these guys again. And move them Seems to be a lot of our top guys up there as well. So this is something that's going to take, you know, some finesse. It's going to take some styling, but spread those guys out like that. So let's unhide our hair and see if that looks any better. Not really. So I'm not quite sure what's causing that issue. It's probably just going to take a lot of tweaking as far as tweaking the collision objects. One thing I can do to sort of fix that, if I want to sort of alleviate that, is under primitives, I can come down to either displacement or offset. Once I have it kind of where I want it to be, I can use offset to kind of pump that up a little bit. But that is how you create dynamic hair using XGen and in hair. Now, if you want, at this point, if you want to use, you know, make cards out of this, you can go back and make cards out of it the same way we did before. You could even go to, let's see, preview output. Let's go to primitives maybe and say cards. Yeah, that's not going to look the way we want it to. Yeah, that's not going to work. So, but you can just, again, you can export the curves and have that work. So that basically switched like that because I switched the type. So I just need to go back to utilities, and I may need to back up and replay our animation. Yeah. So once you switch that, all the length and everything gets kind of reset to what it was before. But let's hide those guys. That is how we create dynamic hair. And again, this isn't the only way. It's not the best way. There's so many different ways. And when it comes to hair, it's just a huge topic that, you know, you can almost have a video series on just hair. But hopefully you kind of learned some tips and tricks on creating hair, and maybe you can combine some of these techniques to achieve what you want for your character.